Yes. So we were thinking, why doesn't everyone, obviously with the topic in mind, transformation, why doesn't everybody type in the chat what transformation means to you? What transformation means to you? I can get the conversation going. Thanks, Denise. Welcome, Armin. Robin, continuously evolving towards better. Adaption, flexibility. David, diversity. Adrene, replacing what doesn't work with what does. Improvement, progress. Hubert, moving from current stage to a desired stage. A change of mindset, Wakil. TM, evolution. So if in terms of your name, there are 3 little dots at the top of your screen. If your name is showing a funny name, you click on those 3 dots and you can actually rename yourself. And you can update from, so-and-so's iPad or a number. You can update it with your name if you're not sure. Varashni, it's the process of change for greater improvement for all involved and environmentally too. Absolutely. Mantiba is iPad. Mantiba, I'm going to update that for you. Impactful change. Absolutely.
Kerry, do you just want to give some context for our YouTube viewers?
Yes, of course. I'm going to start in 2 more minutes. That. So our YouTube viewers, we are live streaming via YouTube as well. And if you can please put in the chat what transformation means to you. We are monitoring the YouTube chat. I'm sorry that you can't use your voice, but not many people have started speaking yet except for me. So please add into the chat. Yugasen, the only way to move forward. Wakil, to relook a process and make it better. So there's a lot of comments about progress and improvement, moving forward, evolving, Rencia. Tinash, change for the better. Transformation involves doing new things to get new results.
I'm keen to know how everyone thinks transformation relates to them as individuals. What is our sense of agency in transformation?
Thanks, Preeya. Wakil, I'm working on a big transformation project which is changing process completely. This comprises culture building, defining the scope, capability assessment, and building. Adam from Web Help, inclusion. Yolanda, transformation means to change your mindset to get a new perspective. Jimmy, change in unconscious biases with real actions implemented.
Sorry, Preeya, I just wanted to find out, your question, was it how are we as agents of change or the urgency of change?
More as an agent. So, just using our own sense of agency, to stand up and how as individuals.
It's in our control.
Yes. What can we do that's in our control? Spot on.
Thanks.
So I'm going to give it 2 more minutes and then I'll start. Thank you for all these great comments. Wakil, personal for me is being adaptable and resilient. Makwinel, transformation means change to me. Always think of the life or story from a work to a butterfly. I like that. Mpumi, transformation is the process of activating meaningful change that takes diversity and productivity into account. Mohini, rising above imperfections. Rosemary, transformation to me means changing your mindset and allowing new ways of thinking to take place. A lot of change, a lot of progress. So we haven't started yet, but we are about to start. Roshni, I think we're all agents of change. It's an active change of mindset to allow ourselves to see different perspectives and create win-win situations. Okay. Okay, everybody, I am going to start just in the interest of time. We do have people coming in as we speak. I would just like to firstly welcome you all. My name is Kerry Smalley. I'm the Marketing Director at USB Executive Development. We are the short course arm of the USB, of the Business School. On behalf of ED, as well as USB's Alumni Association, I'd like to welcome you to the second in our new Conscious Leadership series for the year. And I'm really pleased to see that we have many returning guests that also attended the first webinar. I'm also very happy to see guests from across the continent. So a very special welcome to our clients and specifically our in-country partners. And so, as I did mention, this webinar has a very high registration, which I'm very happy to say. So due to the overwhelming popularity, we couldn't accommodate everyone on Zoom. And so I also welcome you, those that are joining us via live stream on our YouTube channel. So while we can't see or hear you, please still do make your comments and pose your questions in the chat, because we are watching the chat. So we are very much going to make sure that you are included. So I'd like to briefly just contextualize what we mean when we talk about conscious leadership, and really how the series came about, just very briefly. So conscious leader considers the whole person in their leadership style. So by this I mean all facets, personally and professionally. And obviously with COVID-19's meant that these facets of ourselves are continuously and often very visibly overlapping and intertwining and butting heads and needing to be managed. And this is life. And businesses need to account for this, and leaders need to account for this in their leadership styles and their business models and their capacity and their processes in order to maintain an engaged workforce. And very importantly, and very relevant to this topic, a supportive company culture. So with the theme of conscious leadership in mind, the 4 webinar topics for the series were conceptualized based on feedback that we took from our audiences, from our clients, from our participants, in terms of specific challenges they are dealing with across the continent and the world. And most of us, I'm sure, can relate to today's topic, and that's why we're all here. So transformation pressure cooker. What conscious leaders do when the pressure is mounting. Now, obviously, South Africa is placing significant emphasis on transformation from an employment equity perspective, okay? But this conversation is not about the South African context, nor is it about specifically employment equity or any specific element of transformation, or BEE. That's one of South Africa's challenges relating to employment equity. This conversation is about transformation across Africa and across the world in all its complex, gritty, and often uncomfortable glory. And it's about how we can work within our organizations, between organizations, and across sectors, across companies and countries, to open up the conversation of transformation in order to move us forward. All these comments, progress, moving forward, changes of mindset, inclusivity. So, from my perspective, I'm going to focus on opening up my perspectives this morning I'm going to try and get a little bit more comfy in my relative discomfort, and I invite you to do the same. So, before we start, I'd just like to go through the order of proceedings. So please keep your video on if you can. I know it's not always easy, but especially when you ask a question, but if the webinar is underway, please keep your mic off. Obviously, we don't want the sound, background noises interfering. And there will be time at the end for questions. So please do type in your questions into the chat box throughout. Because we're not going to wait until the end for all the questions. We are going to interact. So, I'll be watching the chat boxes on YouTube and in the Zoom room. And, I will be interrupting the webinar on your behalf, or you're welcome to do so as well. And you can ask the questions. So please keep the questions coming. So, to close off, I'm really honored and very excited to hand over to one of Ed's own facilitators, Dr. Preeya Daya, who will be steering the conversation today. And she's joined by other conscious leaders, so Shirleen, Titus, Sandile Miya, and Sharon, Shakung. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to spend time introducing them, because you would have been reading about them on the slides, and no doubt what they do and what they have done and their experiences will also come out in this conversation. So that is it from me for now. So I'd like to hand over to Preeya. And again, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you today to talk about something that's really important and relevant to all of us. Just thank you, Kerry, for that introduction, because I think it just provides some context for the conversation. I just want to start off by providing a little bit of a definition of diversity and inclusion, because it might help us to just close in a little bit and define the boundaries of the conversation. So when we look at diversity, just the word diversity refers to the individuality that every one of us are. Okay, so every one of us is unique. When the way we've looked at it from an employment equity perspective, and in fact globally, the way that many people position diversity is in relation to visible aspects of diversity. So things like race, we immediately associate somebody with their race or their gender or their age, and we box people in according to these social categories. Diversity is in fact bigger than those social categories. It is acknowledging the unique difference that every one of us steps forward with. So the diversity in terms of the way we think, the values that we have, where we were raised, whether we grew up with parents or whether we were raised by a grandparent. There's so many things that affected us in our socialization process as we were raised that effectively contributes to our uniqueness as individuals. So that is the definition of diversity that I'm speaking about today. And even as I look at the chat and I see how people have described what we need to see from transformation, it's really in keeping that we see that there's an evolution beyond this narrow constraint of categories, which I'm very pleased about. Inclusion, just building on that, is about saying let's meaningfully create workplaces where people are able to be themselves beyond categories. So as I step forward into the workplace, am I perceived as an Indian female and interpreted in that way, or am I seen as Preeya, a unique individual that has a unique voice, a unique opinion? So when we talk about benefits of diversity, and when the research, abundant research in this field talks about how diversity, how we see the benefits of diversity, those benefits are really realized and actualized when we start to look at diversity in the full meaning of it. Because when we measure it and manage it through categories, we're not actually going to be able to capitalize on the full force and the benefit of every human. So today we've got a great panel. We met on Monday, actually, the panel, and in fact, Kerry, we had to close down the conversation because it already started to get so exciting. So we're in for a really lovely discussion today, and I invite all of you to participate. Yes, on YouTube, we're watching you too, and we'll keep monitoring that chat box. And similarly here, please keep adding your thoughts in the chat facility. Kerry, Riyadh says that it hasn't started on, the Zoom call hasn't started. Not sure why it hasn't started here on the YouTube channel. So if we can just check that that's happening. Yes, so I'd like to invite you to participate. Keep your comments flowing in the chat function. And if you feel very passionate about something, please put up your hand and say it. There's no wrong thoughts here. We really welcome all engagement, all interaction. So I'm going to start off the conversation with Sandile. I want to ask you, how do you think your team is doing in terms of diversity, inclusion, transformation at Woolworths Financial Services?
Thank you, Preeya, and thank you, Kerry, for inviting me. I guess a starting point for me should be being the only guy in the crew. It's the beginning of transformation, as we spoke about. And you know, it's always a case of when we get to webinars, seminars, it's a group of guys presenting and just one female as a participant. So, and I thank you, USB, for creating this platform and giving us the opportunity also to showcase or even engage and share ideas and thoughts around this topical issue that people are staying away from. That is a thorny kind of topic in businesses. But from a WFS point of view, Woolworths Financial Services, just to give a tip of what we are a subsidiary of Woolworths and EPSA. So we are a joint venture between the two organizations, and we are a standing alone organization. So from our side as Woolworths Financial Services, we drive our own business agenda, keeping in mind the two ships, the motherships, Woolworths and EPSA, and the direction that they're steering us into. We are making strides, slow strides, but we started making shifts. I think it begins with recognition of there is something that needs to be transformed. And if leadership hasn't realized that there is a need for stuff to be transformed, or perhaps I'll get into the details later, but intentionally taking decisions and conscious decisions to say, we need to invest, we need to put in place all those transformational activities. It could be from digital, it could be from human capital, strategy, what needs to be transformed at one point in time, and what is it that is a pain point now that needs to be transformed that cannot wait for later, and how do we gradually go through the transformational journey, recognizing that there are the differences in how we have journeyed from where we started to where we at. And that intentional kind of approach or stance that leadership need to take is the one that is driving our culture now in our organization to say, we need to start building the blocks. One of such is, as an organization, we need to really put in place the tools that will enable us to start that journey. You cannot just start it without the tools. The first one is you need to have a policy that talks to transformation, that talks to EE and equity and all those triple BE and all of those kind of things. If you don't have that, you're not going to get started. You need to have a committee that is an oversight of the process that needs to unfold. If you don't have that, the governance process will fall aside. You need to have sponsorship from executive level, from leadership level, to make sure that all that has been committed for the targets that need to be achieved, all of that, in your quarterly reporting, you're reflecting on all of those things and they come through. And if stuff is not happening, what then do you do as a leader? So from Woolworths Financial Services, the journey has started and it's still slow, but we're making strides. We're getting there.
Lovely. Thank you, Sandile. Shirleen, what is your view on transformation? Where do you think we are?
So I think for me, the lens through which I want to answer this question is really just looking at my own journey, and especially where I've come from to where I am now, and how I see systems and structures changing around me, which enables greater participation. So I think, I firstly I see myself as a pracademic. I have published articles and constantly participate in academic events, but I'm also an employee of a large organization, and I've been, a consultant working for myself. And I always say that to my leader, that I'm a hustler as well. So I'm always doing more than one thing at the time. And I think being an individual who is diverse in nature needs diverse things. Sometimes one is very sensitive to levels of inclusivity. So I think if I think about the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology, we've been having, as in my days as president of the society, we've been having conversations about transformation, diversity, inclusion. And my concern is, Preeya, that these conversations are conversations that doesn't have the sense of urgency that I think, we really intend. So as conscious leaders, we intend for change to happen. I think unless we are relentlessly purpose-driven at bringing a change at an individual level, in an organization, in your own team, at a societal level, you need to show up and you need to be present, lean in, weigh in. So I think for me, if I think about diversity and inclusion as a key element of transformation, and there are many things that we want to transform, I think it is about, how do I show up? How do I lean in? What courage do I have to contribute to difficult conversations? And I think then it will begin to make sense. There's a lot of exclusion. As an academic, if you are not a qualitative or quantitative researcher, you are excluded. People don't understand your positionality. They don't understand your way of thinking. And the refusal, I think, and the lack of curiosity that still exists is a pain point. And for me, that is a pressure cooking moment, which we should embrace. We should make our voices louder and lean in, sit at the table to bring about those type of changes.
Beautifully said. I like that. It's not enough curiosity. Beautifully said. And accountability, I would add. Sharon, what do you think?
Thank you, Preeya, and good morning, everybody. And to be part of this conversation. Preeya, for me, I see transformation at a number of different levels. And I think the highest level, or the broadest context of it, is societal transformation. I think that we have challenges that we're experiencing at a more micro level that are coming from that macro level. And when I look at the societal angle of transformation, I see the challenges being, us still carrying norms and values as societies broadly that are actually not helping us as we move forward in this journey of transformation. The next level that I see is again at the from the angle of values and norms. If you look at the cultures of organizations that we still have today, we are still carrying values and norms that come from age-old beliefs and traditions about organizations, about leadership that are not serving us today, and we're still carrying them. So it creates a bit of a contextual challenge for us to want to transform into something different and better while we are still holding on to and carrying some of these limiting values and norms and beliefs and traditions and concepts even. And I think for us to be able to move forward, one of the things that I think we need to recognize about transformation, I know that one of our participants, audience participants, mentioned the transformation from being the worm or cocoon to becoming a butterfly. And I think that the one thing that we need to acknowledge and understand about transformation, which is a very difficult challenge, is that it does not strive to preserve or conserve the former state. And I've seen that being a very, very major challenge. Even if you just use the South African context for a moment, and you go into organizations that in our country we're trying to transform, we find that one of the biggest challenges is exactly that, holding on to or wanting to preserve or conserve a former state, which is actually not serving the journey and ambition of transformation. So I think those are some of the key elements that we need to be bringing into the conversation.
Yes, I can't agree with you more. And I would, I think we need to explore that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, because there certainly isn't. And even when you look at the results of the Employment Equity Act, and I know that's a South African measure, but it is a key measure. It's an indicator that South Africa uses to assess where we are, and the reality where we are on our transformation journey. And recently I published an article looking at transformation over the last 21 years from an employment equity perspective, and it's very, very concerning to see how little progress we have made over the last few years. So over the last 10 years, in fact, at senior management, there's been a decline in representation of Black leaders at top management. So there was a spike between 2000 and 2010, and then there's been a decline in those numbers since then. So it's very concerning. And yes, in some areas, we can celebrate that there are more women present. But certainly, to everyone's point, it certainly appears as if we have taken our foot off the accelerator a little bit. I want to explore a few more of these pain points, not to focus too much on what they are, but also just to contextualize. There's a lot of us talking, we're speaking the right language. Sandile, I really appreciated what you were saying earlier about making sure that we've got the right policies in place and making sure that there's sponsorship. And even, within the chat, as people said, we need to take accountability. This conversation starts with me. But there's a disconnect between the things that we're saying and the things that we see, and I think that really is to Sharon's point. And so I want to just spend a few minutes. Let's just talk a little bit about the pain points. And then let's navigate the discussion into saying, right, let's maybe mobilize some ideas about how we can get this conversation onto a different level. So let's start with it. Let's talk about some specific pain points. Shirleen, do you want to start off?
So many pain points about transformation, and I think for me, coming from a psychologist perspective, for me, the important thing is in terms of inclusivity, or in terms of just humanity, is to make sure that no one is harmed, and that one treats the other person in the same way I want to be treated, so that there's fairness, justice for everyone. And I'm just thinking of, the last 18 months when we've been in such a big, this has been the greatest pressure cooker period of it all, especially in the organizational context, because of COVID, because people are working from home, because people are really battling. They are burnt out, they are working extensive hours, they're physically drained. And no one, leaders and I think colleagues, even team members, are aware of it. Even me, I'm aware of my own, challenges that I'm facing in terms of risk to burnout, risk to mental health. But because I'm afraid to say I'm actually too tired to take on this task, or because I'm afraid to say there's no psychological safety for me to open up and speak out about my own physical and mental well-being right now. So I think those are, what I see in the world of work is, there was an optimal level of performance, maybe 6 to 12 months ago when we just went into the euphoria of lockdown. But there is a decline now in optimal performance. And one of the key reasons is burnout and mental and psychological well-being of people. And if we want to create psychological safe spaces in the workplace, we've got to act very quickly because we will miss the opportunity, to ensure that people are feeling they can open up, they can speak out to their leaders, they can say, listen, in this organization, I know everyone is, they are in the doing mode, they are on that treadmill, everyone is doing, we're innovating, we're delivering. But silently, there are so many of us in the organization beginning to feel physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. I personally have my mom. She's been suffering with COVID for the last 6 months. Well, not with COVID, but COVID after effects has changed our family landscape like never before, like we never anticipated. Every Saturday, I work one full day looking after my mom to relieve some of my other siblings. And I'm tired, I'm exhausted. So Sundays I sleep, so when do I do things to nurture my soul and my spirit? I've got to consciously be aware. And because I think of one's own experiences, Preeya, you are more sensitive. And, your own agency shifts, and you therefore recognize, to unlock the agency within others. But you do that because you are able to shift to being more compassionate, more patient, more empathetic towards others, only because you've had your own very difficult experiences. If you haven't, there is an oblivion, if you constantly only have success, you don't know what it means to go through hardship. You are insensitive, and I see that all the time. And I wish that we can find a mechanism, where people who haven't experienced the hardship that some of us have experienced, can step back, and just for a moment reflect on putting themselves in the shoes of the other, the significant other, in fact.
I love that. Let's put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. Yeah, true. Nicely said. Sandile, do you want to go next? What are your pain points that you see?
Yeah, as Shirleen is speaking, I'm burning inside to say something, but mindful that I shouldn't cut her short. You raised quite a lot of important facts, and maybe we can have a whole day of conversation around the topics that you just put up there. And one of such is, which I'm not going to go into details now, but we can cover at the later stage. It's a question of trust that is in place. Before the lockdown, I could manage you from seeing what you're doing, from being around you, and I can manage that aspect. Now I don't see you anymore. You are at home. I don't even know at this point in time that when we're in a meeting, you're laying on your bed with your PJs, you're not really in the office and be productive. So people almost kind of wanted to compensate for the lack of trust that leaders have in them. And in that aspect, we then forgot as leaders that we now at home, we established what is called disruptive lifestyle. We brought in the office in the home environment where people should be relaxed. We created that tension. Now everyone must be shushed, quiet, because I'm in the meeting, in a Zoom meeting. I put my camera on. Nobody was walk around me because I don't want people in the Zoom to see my siblings walking in their PJs and granny waving and all of those kind of stuff that we see online. Kids mustn't play and be at home. We need to shush them, say, go play outside. It's raining outside, it's cold. Where must they go? And some of our colleagues, they don't have the luxury of those establishments where they can have an office. I go and sit in the dining room and I work from there, and everyone else must be quiet because I'm engaging with clients throughout the day. And if I say I cannot connect, and leaders don't trust that, I'm actually having connectivity issues. ESCOM and the load shedding and putting people under pressure. And as organizations, at some point, some of us are kind of turning a blind eye on our people's almost like the the challenges that they're going through emotionally. One of such, Preeya, is most of the ladies, and I speak under correction here, with no much of real statistics, most of our colleagues, office has been an escape from the home's hardships. Now we have packaged them in a bag and send them to those hardships to stay permanently there. And we keep on waving a stick from a leadership point of view and say, you underperforming. And we're putting them in another pressure, exactly what you just spoke to, Shirleen. What else must they do? People finding themselves having to compensate with extra hours so that I can please my boss, so I can still keep my job because I've got fear that I might lose my job. So we end up in that space. But what I wanted to touch on earlier on is one point that you started with. It's, preservation of the old guard culture. Sharon, you mentioned that. That transformation is not taking shape in the speed and form that it needs to, because there's an old guard structure that is keeping that legacy. And until such time we start challenging, people must stop speaking frankly and fairly without being fearful of losing their jobs. Because if you challenge leadership in organizations, you are targeted. Any mistake you make, you're out. I mean, we see it in politics. We see it in sports. It's not transformation. We see in politics, in African leadership space. I mean, you could point, say the youngest leader in Africa, the president, is 55. For crying out loud, that person should be getting ready to leave the office. The likes of the Obama at the age of 40, 42, they started assuming that role. But we in Africa, we're still keeping at the 79, you're still campaigning to be a president. I mean, how can you lead the continent to the future that you're not going to be there to experience? How possible is that? And if you start challenging one of those things, then you get either punished. I mean, we've seen with quite a lot of leaders in the country, in South Africa, politics, in sports, in business. When you start speaking, and some of those companies, we've seen how they struggled because they have been sidelined by those who are in power, keeping the old guard. A lot of organizations, the top leadership, I mean, I speak also for my organization, top leadership of our organization is male dominated, white male dominated. And that narrative has to change. And that's where we need to say, when we say transformation, this is where we need to start talking to, instead of talking to transforming at the lower level of the workforce. Let's start transforming from top down, not from the bottom up, because that will never get there, because we'll be stuck in the middle all the time, because direction is coming from the top to the bottom, not from the bottom to the top. Preeya?
Beautifully said. So true. Just yesterday I was teaching a group and we were talking about the very similar thing about voice and how do we start to change organizations when the leaders are not on board. And I think this is probably, it's the same applies for transformation. That, I mean, there are many good leaders, but by and large, when we look at the results, they aren't enough. Otherwise, there would be more transformation. And I think, to your point, I think we just need to start to use our agency some more, and do what we can to change in our environments, create trust, as you were saying. Sharon, what do you think? What's your view? What are our transformation pain points?
Sure. Like Shirleen said, there are so many, but I think for me, it's going to add a little bit to what Sandile just said when he said that it needs to be from top down. And so now I just want to add, other dimensions to that. To say, yes, it needs to be, from the top down, and, change and transformation needs to be led from the top. But I just like to add that the way I see it also is that it needs to be from the inside out. And when we say from the inside out, and we take the context of an organization, what it does is it looks at all of the people that make up that organization and not in a hierarchical format. So if I could be any member of the organization at any level, an emerging leader, junior leader, senior leader, but if my inner diversity landscape or my inner transformation landscape is not in such a state that enables me to then be able to speak to the transformational goals and needs of the organization or the community or the society, then we hit a stumbling block. And I relate it to the levels of consciousness at which we operate. If as individuals, whichever level in the organization we might be, if as individuals we're operating from a place of self-preservation, right? Then I could be a senior leader or a junior leader, and I'm operating from a place that is limiting already from the perspective of level of consciousness. Whereas if I grow from, away from that place of self-preservation and I grow into a space of personal transformation, right? Then I'm enabling myself to grow even more to a higher level of consciousness where I am considering the other as wholly human as I am. And I'm giving the other the same level of regard as I'm giving myself. And I'm upholding the dignity of the other as I would want my own dignity to be upheld. So if we don't transform the way that I see it that way from the inside out, then we will continue hitting our head against the wall, and we will continue to get, once again, using the South African context as an example, we'll continue to get compliance for the sake of compliance by organizations that are being externally motivated by law or policy. And that will not get us anywhere. Because what is happening currently, and I'm not sure about other environments, but I suspect the principle is similar, where if I'm complying for the sake of complying, we're not going to get the kinds of desired outcomes that we all share from a transformation perspective, or even from a conscious leadership perspective. So in my view, I think that's one of my pain points. I had a session a couple of years ago, about maybe 2 years ago, where I was working with a group of junior leaders, emerging leaders. So they're not in leadership positions yet. They are being groomed to be able to develop into leadership levels. And I remember with that one group of young people, I struggled to get to them to understand that we need to be developing empowering values as individuals in order for us to be able to actually grow in our leadership journey. They did not see anything wrong with unethical behavior, for example, and they were drawing on their community experiences and their observation of how the senior people in their communities are conducting themselves, driving negative values and being unethical, and they were seeing that as the norm. So imagine somebody like that not being able to grow from that level of consciousness and growing into senior leadership without the parallel growth, and getting that position of influence and power and still having the same mindset and value system and perspective. They will only comply because the law says comply. They will not be working from a perspective of, I need to be doing this for the greater good. So that's where some of my pain points lie. Preeya?
Thank you. I think you make such an important point here. I was just thinking, when you were speaking about different types of organizations, when we position this literature, there's different types of organizations in terms of how we focus this discussion. There's organizations that take a legislative stance. So whatever that is for that relevant for different countries, they've got different legislation that governs their approach or insight or focus for diversity and inclusion. For us, it's employment equity, BBBEE. So if an organization has a fully legislative focus, so they're saying, right, we're doing this just to comply, then that is going to impact on whether or not they take this whole dignity seriously. Because when somebody is saying our intention is just to comply with legislation, then dignity is not the outcome that they're chasing. The outcome is compliance. And this was confirmed just recently. I was having a conversation with somebody at a law firm who, this is what she does for a living, is when organizations are being audited, she goes in and she puts a plan in place for them. And if they can show that they've got a plan in place, then it helps mitigate the fine or postpone the fine. So, just to your point, there are many organizations, sadly, that are just not on the right, that just don't have the right focus. Those that have a business focus, so there's three types of organizations, as I said. There's the legislative focus, is those that are chasing the business case for diversity because they believe in the inherent benefit that when people with diverse voice speak up, there's more diversity of thought, which contributes to innovation, problem solving, which then helps with the, achieve the outcomes of the team. In those instances, it's easier for us to then chase the whole issue of dignity, because that, by virtue of us chasing and appreciating the value of each individual, we are valuing dignity. And it's also easier for the leaders that have a moral case to say, right, given, the history of, in fact, in South Africa, it was slavery, much in Africa, it's the same agenda where people of different ethnicities or LGBTQIA plus or different genders are marginalized. And they're saying, those leaders are saying, we can't keep this agenda. We've got to transform that agenda. And so they usually also go ahead with the dignity for all perspective. Another interesting thing, just picking on what Shirleen was saying about mental health and how important it is. It's interesting that when you look at how we're positioning this argument globally, there's many organizations that have categorized their transformation agenda as diversity and equity, inclusion and belonging, and the third one is mental health. And so this is, it's a really, really important point that you raise here about if our mental health is not okay, then, the other aspects of transformation, they fade into the background because all we're trying to do is cope. And now I would like to just explore how can we, given where we are at, we're in the middle of a pandemic. In South Africa, we're in the middle of a third wave. In Africa, we're in different stages of approaching or, largely, I think, approaching. In Europe, we kind of maybe see the tail end of that now. Where do you think, given the context that we are at, what's our goal? Just for the next year, let's not focus on the future. Where can we aim to be?
Preeya, before you move away from this, can I just there've been quite a few comments in the chat about confirming a lot of synergy with what Shirleen, Sharon, and Sandile are saying. Obviously working from home in the mental health scenario and the sort of personal inside out approach. So I've just made a few notes here and it struck me. So we've got, the focus on the inside out, top down, to Sandile's point. Shirleen, I found it really powerful in terms of the current situation and working from home and mental health and wellness. We are more receptive to other transformation struggles that potentially other groups of people are facing based on our own experiences. But what's really struck me, how many companies have got a work from home policy? I'm almost certain it's a lot more than the companies that have a gender equality policy, because the mental health and wellness is across the board, especially now, the spotlight, excuse the pun, is on mental health and wellness. But then the concern is, what about organizations' other priorities from a transformation perspective? Do they just get knocked down the totem pole because mental wellness affects everyone? Whereas, groups of people that have been sidelined, they are suffering the same mental health issues, but because of something else. So, inclusivity applies to the inclusive solutions to mental health challenges that we're facing. It applies to inclusivity relating to gender inequality and employment equity and, racism and gender-based violence and ethics, and different religions and cultures. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the company culture. And then, how do organizations go about maintaining a priority? Because, Sandile, to your point, you've got to keep people's jobs, because, Wakil speaks about this fear, and it is a real serious fear. Job security is rife. But how do you get that balance between prioritizing what we used to be focusing on before COVID, which is still super important, and now this?
Agreed, Terry. Agreed.
Sorry, maybe if I can just quickly jump in there to what Kerry was just saying. I think all of that, Kerry, starts with leadership looking at people as the main investment, the main asset. If an organization doesn't look at its people as its main survival and see, how do I make sure that this Ferrari that is driving me everywhere when I get compliments is serviced, is maintained, it needs petrol, it needs all of those things. Will I still be driving on a Ferrari, or I have to call an Uber if I've got enough money for Uber, or I have to catch a taxi or a train? So it's all of that, and not looking at, I need to wear a fancy suit, but I don't take care of my Ferrari that is actually the one that's attracting attention to me and more benefits. I think from a Woolworths Financial Services point, that has been one of the key focal points to say mental wellness is key. Resilience programs need to be in place, because we have sent people home and we didn't even understand their home situation. And they find themselves in a stressful environment. Some of them, their families lost partial of their income, or they lost their jobs. How do we help them come out of that? Because that's going to create stress in one who's working and the other is not working. And how do we help them? And include those that are family members in conversation that support your emotional well-being. We ran quite a number of webinars, invited various guests, specialists to come and speak to what it means to be at home, what it means now, what the pandemic, what is happening, how do you equip yourself with dealing with all these challenges. And the inclusivity for me is not just to say, let's include the call center agent in conversation, but it's also saying, let's include their siblings in that conversation, because it's not that individual only now, it's the whole package of the whole family that we have adopted, because they are now working in the same space, and if that is not in place, I think the organization is going to go down. Thanks, Preeya.
Thank you, Sandile. Shirleen?
Yeah, for me also to weigh in. So I think our organization has been really, really amazing at supporting their employees during this period. And it started right at the top. It's well known that our group CEO, he places a lot of attention on being a force for good. You understand vitality, it's inherent in our DNA to want to win for the individual, the organization, and the third stakeholder, the system, if you like. So we've done quite a lot in our organization, but one of the significant things that I think, so right from the start, from COVID, we started with webinars. Our CEO, ran webinars, invited all our senior executives, ran webinars, spoke to us about our core purpose, to enhance and protect the lives of others. And they literally, preached that purpose into our minds and into our hearts, so that we can understand what that means when we are interacting with our direct reports and within our smaller teams. We also had a look at our values. We updated our values, and we included, very deliberately, the concept of diversity and inclusion in our great people value. The other thing that we did was we also, in terms of our programs, like Sandile says, we looked at building resilience. You know, we looked at maintaining constant, we've started running intensifying coaching circles where people could come and talk about the challenges that they're experiencing with their teams. I personally, you know, with my direct reports, we had, you know, embraced a culture of weekly check-ins, and the check-in is not about work. The check-in is just about being creative. We used to put the whiteboard up. We used to draw little things, little flowers, little houses, put our emotions, you know, in art. We also have one-on-ones. I have a one-on-one every week with all of my team members about their performance. So performance discussions is a lot more intimate rather than, you know, talking about team performance. You have to do that, but you spend time trying to understand the context of the individual and maybe what has shifted in terms of their ability to deliver before you take it into. So creating safe spaces is important. Inviting the right speakers who are authentic. We had speakers who had their own journeys of suicide and own journeys of depression that they came to share with us. I think inviting speakers who only want to talk about the bottom line, you know, you can feel it, even if they talk about, you know, things that they've been through that's difficult. If it's not authentic, if it's not inside out, as Sharon has said, you know, you sense the inauthenticity. So I think it's important when we select our speakers, when we select that they are vulnerable, they can speak about their own life stories, because storytelling is really, really very important. And that's going to be one of the fundamental anecdotes towards our healing as a nation. It's being able to look back and say, you know, this is my story. My mom had COVID. This is my story. I lost my job. This is my story. My husband and my mom and dad passed away during COVID. And, you know, all we can do, I think, as conscious leaders, as conscious citizens, if we want to restore and nurture a society to become normal again, we have to listen more. We have to be gentle. We have to be warm and kind. And we cannot only do this within our little social circle around our little dinner table with our little norms. We've got to be able to open our hearts and minds to a broader society, people who are different to us, you know, people who are have different social settings than us, if we want the society to be well again.
Absolutely lovely. Sharon?
Thanks, Preeya. If we want society to be well again, I like that, Shirleen. I think if we are to move forward, you know, we're going through a very extremely challenging experience as a global society. If we are to move forward, in my view, I think we need to move forward into a different place and a different state. And I'm saying that because, Shirleen, I want to build on your point. If we want to be well again, I'm shifting us a little bit away from the again and looking for a different kind of wellness. Because before COVID, what we shouldn't do is almost, deceive ourselves into believing that, you know, before COVID, we were looking good. As a global community, as a global society, because we are not, and we all know that. So what I'm looking for and what I'm working towards with the clients that I work with is a very different way of being. I think this pandemic has given us the opportunity is giving us the opportunity to go back to the drawing board and to revisit and relook how we were doing things before now, and what it means for us going into the future. What is it that we need to do differently? And very, very differently in some cases, fundamentally differently. I mean, the way that we've been structuring organizations and you know, building cultures in organizations, this is a chance for us to do that differently, and to achieve, I suppose one could even say, more humane ways of being, you know, at individual level, as families, as communities, as societies, as organizations, because remember, our organizations are existing in societies. So this is a chance for us to go back to the drawing board in that way. And I'll bring back again the issue of values and norms. You know, what is it that we want to look like as individuals, as communities, as societies, and how do we work to get there? And one of the things that that again Shirleen mentioned is empathy. You know, how do we become a more empathetic society? You know, how do we become a society that has that view of ourselves and of other people as people and not as objects? Because we've had that very, very strongly evident in our organizations, where, you know, and as Sandile says, we've been, you know, seeing our people as objects and not as people. And I mean, it's been how many decades that we've been saying as organizations, people are our greatest assets. But we never really treated them as valuable as that. You know, the other non-human assets were actually treated as more of a priority than the human assets. So I think this pandemic, what it has done to us is it has literally brought us to that realization. You know, it has brought us to our knees even. and we almost like saying in response, yes, we see it now, that in fact, we need to be seeing one another, you know, across our diversity, from internal diversity to external diversity, as Preeya was saying, the visible diversity. We are now seeing one another as humans, and we are going to be learning to treat one another as humans, with empathy being one of the things that we need to learn. And I think just one other thing for me is in terms of organizational support, and there's one of the clients that I'm working with who is presenting conscious leadership in a really great way by providing a facility for individual and group coaching for the people in their company. And that is working really, really well. And in other organizations as well that I'm working with, they are investing very, very strongly in proper resilience training. I'm saying proper because, again, with resilience training, with the pandemic coming in, it almost became like a fad. You know, we all also doing it. Oh, we're also doing it. And then it loses its value. But I've experienced organizations where resilience training, which is very difficult training, is done properly, and the support that's required is given to the people in those organizations. So there are some positives that we're seeing as we step into this new and hopefully very, very different future that we're creating for ourselves. Preeya?
Preeya, just to add as well, you know, this is a dilemma. There's a paradox here. You know, we still want, we need to make sure people are well, but we still need to address the exclusion. You know, you're not white enough, you're not Black enough, you're not, your gender's not right, your skill set isn't right, your qualification is from the wrong university. You know, those are aspects that it's ridiculous that we're still fighting about those things. It's ridiculous that I still have to say, I'm fine having had my education at that university and I can stand the test of time. It's ridiculous that you have to still prove yourself. You know, that the glass ceiling for women, you know, is not yet representative at executive levels. In middle management, we've got more women than male. So I think one of the things that, to build on what Sharon is saying and Sandile, is we have to put people first, because people will be the vehicle to bringing about those changes, but we cannot drop the ball. So we have to deal, it's the both and mindset. And we have to remind ourselves, you know, that we cannot put the one above the other, because we need to still focus on those things where, you know, we leave people, we exclude people because we perceive them to be not good enough or not educated enough, or, you know, so not enough. It's difficult because if I come from a place where I am enough, it's still hard for me. So it's still hard for me with, it doesn't matter how much psychological capital I have, you know, it's still hard for me to break some of the boundaries that exist in the social context if we don't do this as a collective.
So speaking to that, Shirleen, Yolanda has a comment. Yolanda, would you like to say it, or would you like me to make the comment for you?
You can go do it. Thanks.
So Preeya, Yolanda speaks about you know, the need for this change, but how leaders aren't actually forcing the issue. You know, it's you know, there's more and more things getting added, but how are we actually going to get management and organizational leadership to drive this change? So Shirleen, you know, speaking to you know, we know what needs to happen, but how can leaders really step up?
Thanks, Yolanda, for that question. I think it's very relevant. You know, I'm just wondering if we are not onto something completely new here. You know, so let me just quickly list this and tell you guys what I'm thinking. Substantive inequality has never been higher. Okay, so when I talk about that, I'm talking about stigma, stereotyping, prejudice, violence, unequal voice and participation. The unequal pay is prevalent. So people that are Black and female don't have unequal pay. So they are paid more poorly than white counterparts. Privilege is abundant, so people still don't acknowledge their privilege. There's a sense of compliance, just to Yolanda's point, that the leaders are still not taking this seriously. Our government structures are not where they need to be. So in terms of employment equity, there's a lot of circling, but not necessarily a lot of change. So we've got a lot of structural impediments to equality in our society, and which is really why we're not transforming. But I'm just, you know, just listening attentively to what all of you are saying, and I'm wondering if our in is not this, you know, just building on what Sharon was saying, is building on our humanity. And maybe the focus is going to be on let's just appreciate one another as individuals. And as we navigate to that conversation, we then can stop worrying about how somebody is othered because they're LGBTQIA+, or how somebody is othered or less because they're a woman, or othered because they're disabled in some way. And I'm just wondering if, as we navigate, yeah, you know, I've said it, I think that maybe the way forward, you know, to what Sharon is saying is very different to the way back. And I'm just wondering, what do you guys think about that? You know, what do you think?
Yeah, just a quick comment to what also Sharon was saying earlier on. Just something just came to mind was also triggered by what you said, Shirleen. You know, with this hybrid ways of working, and the new challenges that is going to pose on us as organization, where is the sense of belonging, people's sense of belonging to the culture? And how does that culture looks like now that I'm in my own house? I'm not in your building, in your structure. I'm in my own house working from there. Do I still belong to the culture of your organization? And how does it look like? What are the principles and the kind of guardrails that define that culture. Yeah, your mission statement. I mean, we are almost 2 years in this COVID. I haven't seen at least one organization that has changed its mission statement or its marketing strapline to embrace humanity or people. They're all embracing change in ways of business operation. But where is the people part of it? That needs to come through strong in this time when people need to be a central focus of organizations. And what you touched on earlier on about different organizations or companies, one of such that came to mind was, I think the compliance component of it put government and its failures aside. Organizational leaders or the structures in organization has failed to take shape in terms of governance processes. And authentic leadership has failed to rise to the occasion. I mean, for compliance, I mean, we spoke about the dashboard. They're looking good, fantastic for board reporting, because we have got 1 or 2 window dressers of individuals that will push our scorecard high. We know how to manipulate the scorecard. We know how to play the game. We take Sharon and put her on the position, but she's insignificant. She doesn't have to make noise. Sit there, Sharon, and enjoy the pack. But we'll report on you as a key contributor on our BBBE scorecard and on our EE scorecard. It's all of those kind of subtle things. And I wonder, perhaps maybe somebody who's got experience with trade unionism, where does representation sort of kick in? We've got trade unions. We've got workplace forums. Are they effective enough to hold business accountable on the key deliverables that they committed to that need to be delivered? So I'm wondering whether the unions now, are they changing their strategy around their representation since people are working from home? How do you represent somebody who's at home, who's feeling not part of the organization, who's not included? How do they go about doing that? And we as leaders in organization, consciously, how do we make sure that our people, I mean, from what you said, getting in touch with your team weekly, how do we make sure that we make them to feel as part of belonging? I mean, my team, I told them, I'm an extrovert. I cannot work from home. I'll be in the office every day. You know where to find me. Come in at least twice a week. Let's have coffee. Let's chat. Let's rehearse. Let's have fun. And that's how they become part of the entire journey. They don't feel like they are there to just crunch the numbers and give me all those good reporting and statistics. They need to be part of the whole process. When we package the board report, they have to write pieces of what goes into that board paper. I cannot sit there and write everything myself. They delivered. They need to be part of that. They have to feel like when the executive present at board level, they feel proud that it is their work that is being presented. They become part of the whole process. Not Sandile is running the show. We just have to give input in the background and then he just go and look good in front of the big bosses. But we are part of that journey. But it talks to that, what culture are we building going forward in this new ways of working where people, I mean, 99.9% of our staff is working from home. Is there any organization that still exists or we've got freelancers working from home? I dare ask the question. Over to you, Preeya.
Thank you. I like Mpumi's comment here. I'll just open it up. The problem with us as South Africa is that we talk a lot and yet do little or nothing. Mpumi, I think this is not just a South African issue. I think that this is it's a global issue. There's a lot of talking going on. We've been preaching transformation for 30 years or even longer to my knowledge, and yet we've done or achieved less or nothing. I can't agree with you more. And the big thing though, is that what are we going to do differently? Given what's happening with COVID and given that people are under such strain, what is our focus for transformation for the next year that we're going to be able to pivot? And what Sandile was saying about a global focus on being more human and how organizations are not talking this talk. In fact, globally, organizations have shifted more than ever to having a more human-focused organization, people-centric, that's having purposeful organizations, more than ever, organizations have pivoted to saying that people are and planet are alongside the profit agenda. And so I think this conversation is, it's good timing for us, I think, to talk about, or really even just to think about, how do we now start to use our own sense of agency to move this conversation forward. In the past, transformation is a lot about pain. And, that's really why so many people avoid this conversation. There's so much shame attached to it. It's other people's problems. And often when I teach diversity and inclusion, I always share this example and I ask people, I say, right, put up your hand. How many of you are racist? Not one person will put up their hand. I say, right, who's sexist? Not one person. Who's anti-gay? Not one person. But if every one of us, if there's no racists, if there's no sexists, if all of us are fine with LGBTQIA+, then why are we in a transformation quandary as a society? It just simply does not make sense. And so for me, this entire conversation comes back to ourselves as agents. We need to stop waiting for other people to give us permission to start taking this seriously. And what does seriously mean? I think for me, it means just appreciating one another. Just treating one another with dignity. Let's stop making assumptions that because you're a black male, you're going to think in this way. And because you're a white male, equally, you're going to think and behave in this way. That these finger pointing of you are like this, you are like that, it is hurting us individually and as a country. And we need to move beyond this in order to make progress with this whole transformation agenda. What else do you guys think? Let me open up to the panel, and I'm going to invite our audience to please step in with your comments as we start to close this discussion. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Preeya, if I may.
Are you going to go, Sharon?
Yeah, thank you. If I may. My experience has been a little bit different. The questions that you said, you asked and nobody puts up their hand and so on. When I do my diversity work, I approach it in a slightly different way that has enabled people to actually step forward and be almost own their position, whether it's sexual orientation or the race thing or culture or whatever. And I've seen people being able to become more open and more honest and more willing to engage and willing to learn and willing to step into that discomfort. And if it's done very carefully, people are able to do that, and then the engagement actually happens. And that enables the beginning of the shift. Because I think the other thing that we need to appreciate is that transformation is very different from change. Change is not necessarily permanent. Change is not necessarily fundamental, and change is a constant. But I suppose you could view transformation as very deep change that's not very easy at all. So if we as communities, across the world, if we put our heads together and find ways of how can we create environments and opportunities for that transformation to begin to happen. And part of it is helping one another to overcome the fear and the shame, as you say in prayer, that comes with it. And sometimes it's not even sometimes, it requires a significant level of vulnerability. It requires a significant level of psychological safety. It requires a significant level of empathy and willingness to learn and willingness to go there, and that's what we're fearing. We're very cautious when we engage issues around transformation. Either that, or we go to the other extreme where we're very harsh and very blunt and hurtful. So we need to work together to find that middle ground. And I've had that experience where when that middle ground is found, it can be used very, very constructively. But at the end of the day, it still requires personal commitment. If all of us as individuals involved in our different spaces and so on, if we don't have that personal commitment, and coupled with an ability to call one another to account. You see, that's the other part of my work, where I help organizations to find ways of, okay, so this is where we want to go. This is how we can get there. And we've already stepped in, or we are stepping in. It's going to be a long journey. It's going to be a difficult journey. How do we support one another? And how do we also call one another out when we see us, one another, or see ourselves starting to go against this mission that we have embarked on? So it needs to be enabled in a number of different ways. And that's where I see the gap, is where that enablement is not happening. The harsh stance is hurting us, and you know, we need the law. Yes, we do. And sometimes I've seen it being, we need the law for those who are not personally committed to this journey. But sometimes we use the law and then we potentially, you know, hurt ourselves and our prospects going forward, even with those who might be willing to step into the journey in a different way. So yes, we've been talking for many years, as some of our audience members are saying. And Preeya, as you're saying, yes, we are seeing a shift beginning to happen, you know, in different parts of the globe and so on. But my encouragement for all of us, and my invitation to all of us, is that we need to work together to better enable ourselves to make progress in this space. And I believe that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a question from the audience.
I think Hanish, if I'm saying your name, Hani CH, you raised your hand for the second time. Maybe it's an opportunity for him to speak.
Thanks, Sandile.
Hi, Sandile. Thank you very much for that. And to all the speakers. I must say, for me, this is a very a topic that's very near to my heart. And what I feel is that we've got certain blind spots and we don't realize it, especially during this era that we're in with the remote working. So you get a senior member of staff joining, senior member of management joining a team that's already there. And they're somewhat excluded, right? But we exclude them without that realization. And I really think that conversation needs to start in the boardroom. And we need to see that it's some of the little things that we are doing. I'll give an example. I joined a team. So not only am I a Black female, but I'm also foreign. So I'm not from South Africa. So there's all those things that I add.
I think, Honey, you went on mute.
Oh, sorry. So it's business as usual in a very business unusual world. So we need to really be mindful of all those small little things.
Agreed. Okay. No, I completely agree. And you know, Honey, this is about conscious leadership. You know, when we talk about awareness, this is directly what this term conscious leadership is about. And it's what differentiates us from leadership like charismatic, where we've got one person and that style, you know, further to what somebody was saying before, is cascaded, that negative behavior is, you know, it's normed. And that's what's dangerous. But what differentiates conscious leadership is it brings awareness into this entire conversation. And it helps us to think critically about our own behavior and grow from that. You know, I think everybody has said that we need to be gentle around these conversations. We need to be gentle with ourselves, because if we are hard and if we blame and we shame, then we will avoid the conversation. And so in order for us to engage it, we need to tread a little bit more gently, and we need to be, you know, to Sharon's point, we need to be a little bit more empathetic and supportive in how we engage with one another. Thank you. Thank you for speaking. Anybody else have a contribution?
Can I just quickly put in one or two words there, Preeya? I think there's one thing that has come through as a theme throughout this conversation, It's intentional leadership that is required. Leadership that really have to do things with the intention to make the difference, and they must stand the ground. And we as contributors, we need to really be in that space and challenge the status quo without any fear of retribution. And I mean, I know a couple of the colleagues of mine are in the call. They know the kind of character I am. And that's who I am. As if business cannot accept the Sandile that they have inherited, then I'm at the wrong place. Perhaps maybe I should look elsewhere to go and trade my experience and my expertise. But it's all of that. I mean, I'll give you an example. Recently, I have just really looked at, given that people with disability, living with disability, have been so excluded in opportunities or at the workplace, because organizations, they will tell you our building structure is not suitable for people with wheelchairs. Now is the time to change that narrative, because you can enable them with all the digital tools, the laptop, to work from home. What's stopping now businesses to start employing people living with disabilities? When before you had a structure as an, sort of, we can't because of 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's one of those things that leaders need to start looking at and make a decision to say we need to empower everyone. We need to include everyone in accessing the economic opportunities. I think, and also we don't celebrate success often of those processes that we have taken a bold decision in transforming and put it out there as success, and challenge others to also step up. So I think there is a lack of that aspect. Otherwise, if it happens, it's at the point of window dressing, when we window dress with one individual as if this is all that can be achieved. I think the last comment I'd like to leave for the attendees is the quote from Wayne. I always get name wrong. Wayne Daya. When you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at change. That is my favorite. Everywhere I go, I close with that. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And that's how it has to start, from inside out, before you can start going changing stuff. Change internally, introspect, and change yourself and how you look at certain things and appreciate. And then you can start building on that. Thank you, Preeya.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandile. Shirleen, do you want to share your closing thoughts?
Yes, I was actually, I also had looked at the comment from Mokoena, where she said, for the last 30 years, we've been speaking about this topic. And I think just looking at, the time frame being 30 years must already have cognitively an exhaustive effect just on one's mind. But what I want to say is, I wanted to bring it back to me, who I am as a person, as a human being, and what am I going to do? So I think from my side, there's a quote that I always refer back to. It's a quote from Viktor Frankl, where he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in this space lies our freedom. But I think in this space, we find meaning, what is that freedom we are all looking for? So from my side, I want to say, if I want to spend more time reflecting, I want to spend more time in this space, because I'm sure if I'm looking for a space of freedom and quality of life for myself, I can impact my children around me, my family around me, and the world around me. But also, if I have role models out there, if I have people out there, like this panel, like Preeya, like Sharon and Sandile, if I can continue a connection with people like me who want this change to happen, and people like you, the people on this call, I think if we can build a community of practice, together we can bring and make this world a better place to be. I don't have to do this alone. I find comfort in knowing that there's people who are interested in this type of conversation. And I'm looking forward to some of the next steps, some of the connections that some of us will hold dear. Thank you from my side.
You're on mute, Preeya.
Sorry, I was saying, what are your closing thoughts, Sharon?
Thank you. Mine is very short, and I'd just like to say to everyone in the room today, thank you for being here. And my last thought to all of us is, until and unless we are willing and wanting to transform at a personal level, to do the work that's required for us to transform as individuals, we will compromise the achievement of our transformation goals at institutional and societal level. So the work starts with us. We need to do that introspection. We need to find that which is sitting within us that might be an obstacle for us to move forward. And we need to courageously embark on that personal transformation journey in order for us to become the agents and enablers of the broader transformation agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And my closing thought is, let's be conscious leaders. So consciousness is about awareness. Let's be aware of our behavior. Once we are aware of it, we can see whether we are responding in fear or whether we are responding in curiosity. We respond in fear very quickly, more easily. In fact, it's a biological response for us to do that because it's protective. But it does block that curiosity. So therefore, the ability to be conscious is essential in order for us to take this conversation of transformation forward. Because it all starts with that awareness. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation, for your involvement. And thank you, USB Ed, for setting this up. It's been a good discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Preeya. So we are 1 minute over time already. That was a very, very quick hour and a half. So thank you to everyone who is still here. I'm going to just talk through the next webinar we have coming up, as well as, really my sincere thanks, Preeya, to you, to Sharon, to Shirleen, and to Sandile, the rose amongst the thorns. I really think that this has given us all food for thought. I must say, a different perspective and the opportunity that we have with COVID, for transformation across the board. It's a massive opportunity. And, to Ruby's comment in the chat, it's about the small steps that we need to take as individuals, 100%. So our next webinar, everybody, is on the 26th of August, and it is with Dr. Mornay Mustard. He will be our ringleader for that session, and it is really focusing on critical thinking, so making sense, the tech, the digital, and the data. So it follows nicely from this conversation as well, and it's about how conscious leaders approach the challenges of data literacy or illiteracy, more to the point, technology, and then digital transformation in the workplace. So, if any of you have ever met Mornay Mostert, he is a serious, charismatic facilitator. So, and I think that it should be a very, very interesting session. We'll also have some industry leaders from across Africa, and I hope that you can join us. If you can move on to the next slide, Laura. There we go. And so now this is our very own Dr. Preeya Daya's book, which she has co-authored this year, 12 Lenses into Diversity in South Africa. So, I'm absolutely certain that all these lenses could be applied outside of South Africa. There is no doubt. So I would really encourage you to have a look at Preeya's book. It is available to purchase on Amazon and on Takealot and via the Knowledge Resources website. So I'd like to congratulate Preeya as well for publishing this book, to add author to your list of accolades. We're really, really privileged to have you facilitate this session for us this morning. And then that's it for me. So thank you for joining us. I'm sorry that we've gone 3 minutes over time. To my panelists and to Preeya, again, sincere thanks from me. Okay, and wishing everyone a lovely day further.
Thank you. Thank you, Kerry.